Assalamu alaikum. Hi everyone. I would like to welcome you all to today's session about Emirates Mars mission, the Arabs' world first interplanetary mission. I would like to thank the Ministry of Affairs and International Cooperation for hosting us. In today's session, the Emirates Mars mission team will take us to a journey to the red planet, which is scheduled to launch on July 15th. Honestly, I'm very excited and happy to be the moderator of this session. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Khuloud AlHarmoodi, part of AMM team, leading the Product Assurance and Logistics team. Let's welcome the speakers together. We have Omran Sharaf, AMM Project Director, Her Excellency AlAmiri, Minister of State, leading the science team in AMM. And finally, we have Suhail al-Dhafri, Deputy Project Manager, leading the Spacecraft segment, and he's currently one of those who are in Japan at the launch site. Omran, the first question is to you. Everyone is wondering why Mars, why are we going there, and how is it important to the UAE? Can you please give us a brief about the mission?
Thank you, Khuloud, for the introduction, and I would like to also thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for this invite and interest in the mission. So why Mars? Why did the UAE choose Mars? For many reasons. In 2013, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid met with us towards the end of 2013 to give us a set of requirements for the mission. These set of requirements were focused on the UAE, but also there were other sets that were focused on the region. So when it came to the UAE government wanted to inspire the youth to go to STEM and wanted to create a big shift in the mindset among the youth to create a disruptive change amongst different sectors in the UAE that would serve our future's economy and at the same time certain national challenges. So the same way that the engineers had a career path, the country has invested many years in preparing engineers. They wanted to do the same for the scientists through this mission, to create opportunities. Why? Because the government, through the space program, through the Emirates Mars mission, wanted to build the scientific capability that would support the establishment of a sustainable science and technology sector in the UAE that serves our economy and our economic interests, to create a competitive, innovative, and creative knowledge-based economy in the UAE. So it's about the future of our economy, it's about the future of the UAE, and also to address different national challenges that we have. For example, when it comes to water, clean energy, food resources, the capacity and capability through the space program, eventually the government wanted that to go and serve these interests. Why? Because currently we depend a lot on imported technologies when it comes to actually supporting our economy and also in addressing these national challenges. So this is one of the reasons why the government looked at the Mars mission, and it wanted to expedite. So it used it as a catalyst for a big change and to expedite the changes happening in the academic sector, in the industrial sector, and within the commercial sector with regards to SMEs being involved in such projects, and also identify gaps that we have in the UAE for that knowledge-based economy that we are actually thriving to achieve and build here. So this why the mission was initiated for the UAE, but at the same time, UAE government wanted to send a very strong message to the Arab youth, a region that has more than 100 million youth in it, with a lot of potential, a lot of set of skills, and around that time, towards the end of 2013. The region was going through really tough times, especially with regards to the Arab Spring and the changes that are happening in different countries and the unrest that's taking place and the different groups that were coming up and doing different things to the region. So basically, the Arab youth were either leaving the region, which is not good, migrating to other countries. So it's not going to help in stabilizing the region and building a more stable nations in this region. At the same time, you had a group that were unfortunately just stuck, not able to innovate, and stuck in fighting, I guess, ideological differences, and another set of group were unfortunately investing their energy and creativity in the wrong ways by joining their own groups at that time. So it's the message that the UAE government wanted to send. So they set a very ambitious target for us. They said we want the UAE to reach Mars before the 2nd of December 2021, the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the UAE. To send a very strong message to the Arab youth is that if the UAE is able to reach Mars in less than 50 years, a young nation like us, then you can do much more. Given your history, given the past of the region and the scientists that came out of the region and the knowledge that this region used to generate more than 800 years ago, this region used to be a symbol of coexistence. People of different backgrounds live together, people of different faith live together to build the region. And a lot of the scientists that came out of this region came from different backgrounds. The moment we stopped thinking and generating knowledge and building ignoring our differences and coexisting together, we started moving backwards. So this is the UAE's message to the Arab youth: is put the differences aside, let's build this region together, let's learn from each other, and be better integrated into the rest, into the international community. So another requirement that His Highness gave us was, he said, you have to build it, not buy it. The science needs to be novel, so you cannot do something that's been done before. We want you to come up with a novel approach, a novel science, an Emirati model of developing such missions in a very short time frame. We literally had 6 years to develop the mission, compared to similar missions, which usually have 10 to 12 years to be delivered. And basically, he said, learn from others, don't start from scratch. Learn from others, the same way you collaborated in the past for Dubai Sat 1 and Dubai Sat 2 when you were based in South Korea and learned from them and you worked with them. Do the same here. And as you know, like after Dubai Sat 2, we were able to build our first Earth observation satellite in the UAE that was sat. But now we're talking about a much bigger challenge. It's about reaching Mars. And taking that knowledge and bringing it back to the UAE and actually not keeping it with the space sector, no, sharing it with the other sectors and creating that disruptive change. So when they wanted to create that big disruptive change in other sectors, they looked at Mars. So the approach by itself, by His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed and by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid is actually innovative. So this was these were the set of requirements given to us, and international collaboration was core to the reason why we actually were able to reach where we are today. We didn't go and buy the system. We actually worked as one team with our partners at the University of Colorado at Boulder, in which we had one team. So it was not the identity of the team was the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center and the University of Colorado. No, it was the Emirates Mars mission team. So you had an American reporting to an Emirati reporting to an American, working as one team and ensuring that there is knowledge transfer happening. And the unique thing about the approach that we had compared to our previous missions was that we had a team based in the US, but also we had a team that was based in the UAE and another team that was actually traveling back and forth between US and the UAE. So unlike the previous missions in which we had to be based in another country for a long period of time and most of the work happened there, we actually had that kind of a bridge being established between the sector in the UAE or the activities in the center here in the UAE and our partners over there. So this is the reason why the UAE is going to Mars. So it's not, as His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid said before, it's not about reaching Mars. It's a mean for a much bigger goal. It's about inspiring the Arab youth. It's about inspiring the UAE youth. It's about the future of the UAE and our economy and addressing our national challenges.
Thank you, Omran. Your Excellency, people are curious about the red planet and the possibility of living on its surface. Can you please share with us what the science objectives are and how did you choose them?
Of this mission is looking primarily at the atmosphere of Mars and better understanding it and mapping gaps in our knowledge and understanding of Mars's weather dynamics throughout an entire Martian year. The Emirates Mars mission for the very first time will map the full day to night cycle of the changes in the weather system in the lower atmosphere of Mars. So we observe the water ice clouds, we observe changes in the temperature on both the surface of Mars, but also in the atmosphere of Mars up to 50 kilometers. We also look at the cycles of the dust on Mars and better understand the influences that allow the creation of global dust storms that engulf the entire planet. The Emirates Mars mission also looks at the upper atmosphere of Mars. And what we do there is study the extension of hydrogen and oxygen into space. Hydrogen and oxygen, as we all know, are the building blocks of water. What we want to better learn and understand overall is what's happened to water on the surface of Mars, and how did Mars evolve from an atmosphere that was wet and much thicker than the atmosphere that we see today to an atmosphere that is dry, arid, and also one that is much thinner, that does not allow liquid water to be sustained on the surface of Mars. To be able to answer and address one of the pieces of the puzzle when it comes to atmospheric loss and loss of hydrogen and oxygen is we want to better understand what role does Mars play in kicking out atoms of hydrogen and oxygen into space. And by that, what we do is we start correlating what happens in the lower atmosphere. So if there's a dust storm in the lower atmosphere of Mars, does that impact or does it increase the rates of escape of hydrogen and oxygen from the upper atmosphere? And if there's a formation of clouds during a certain season, does that again influence the rates of escape of hydrogen and oxygen from the atmosphere of Mars? We're able to do that using 3 instruments that are on board the spacecraft in conjunction with the unique orbit that the Emirates Mars mission flies its HOPE probe on. The 3 instruments that we have look at Mars as a planet using different lenses or using different spectrums. The first is we measure the lower atmosphere of Mars in the infrared, and that allows us to observe most of the core components that make up the Martian lower atmosphere, and that's the dust, the ice clouds, and the water vapor. And we look at that through the infrared lens. We also are able to take colored images of Mars. And more importantly, we're also able to observe from our EXI instruments through the ultraviolet spectrum, ozone and water ice. We then look at the upper atmosphere of Mars, and we're able to look at it through the lens of an ultraviolet spectrometer called IMUSE. And that measures rates of escape of hydrogen and oxygen and how far out hydrogen and oxygen go into from the atmosphere of Mars into space. The orbit of the Emirates Mars mission is quite unique in terms of allowing us to create these observations. As I mentioned, the most important part of the science of the Emirates Mars mission is that it provides us a full understanding of the cycles from day to night of the weather system on Mars. Prior to this, other missions have been locked at a certain time. So they observe different locations of Mars and give us the weather at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. That, as we understand, is as if I'm coming to tell you, come and study Earth, pick a few random locations and measure the temperature and the changes in the weather and the cloud formation, but only during 2 times of the day. That doesn't give you a full and comprehensive understanding of the weather dynamics. The same way that the weather is a complex system here on Earth, it's just the atmosphere also on Mars is a complex system there. And we need to better understand and better learn how that dynamics happen to feed into what's happened, the primary question of what's happened to the atmosphere of Mars.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This leads us to a very important question to you, Suhail, since you're leading the spacecraft development. How did you translate the designs to have the capability of answering these scientific questions?
So we started with, as Her Excellency said, we started with 3 questions of the science objective of this mission. It's been translated to 4 measurement requirements that have to be made to answer these 3 scientific questions. And from there, we designed and selected 3 instruments, as Her Excellency explained, and that will be placed on one of the side of the EMM spacecraft. And for that, we designed the whole spacecraft around how to reach Mars. Of course, you can, from the picture you can see that the spacecraft is huge. That is based because of the propellant that we required it for only 35 minutes reaching Mars, and that's how we designed the spacecraft around all of it to be in this shape with 2 deployable solar panels, 1 instrument panel that will host the 3 instruments, and 1 bus panel that will host the other subsystems that gonna work on the spacecraft, from command data handling, from communication hardwares, from ADC hardwares, from the electrical power subsystem. Of course, as you see, the 34 minutes that we're gonna reach Mars, we have to work on going into Mars orbit, and that's why the spacecraft is so huge, that we have to host 800 kilogram of fuel, and that would require to enter the Mars orbit. So as we travel from Earth to Mars after the separation from the launcher, we have to go into a 34 minutes as we reach Mars on a break system that we have to go inside the Mars gravity to be captured inside Mars. Otherwise, if there's any mistake happens, we either go on a flyby or we go, if God forbid, we go crash to the Mars planet. And from there, we're gonna be orbiting Mars on seasonal. So we're gonna start measuring the Mars as the requirement to answer these scientific questions.
Okay, Suhail, speaking about your experience in the development of satellites, how is EMM different than other satellites you have worked on before?
So I worked on Dubai Sat 1, Dubai Sat 2, and Khalifa Sat. I was focusing in developing the electronics of a camera system inside the Dubai Sat program. And it was very small inside electronic design on a very small instrument. And comparing the size, it's very small compared to EMM. On EMM, I'm a spacecraft lead. I have a team members working with them. So I have to study and understand all the subsystem and how they integrate together to develop such a mission. I worked with a new design of propellant as a liquid propellant hydrazine, and this has never been designed before in our center. And this was some of the differences that added to this mission. As well as working with the US partners, they added more experience, a different dimension to the knowledge we have. We're always learning, so the US partnership was really great, understanding a different way of working compared to the previous experience that we had with the South Koreans.
I totally agree with you, Suhail. In terms of safety and mission assurance, EMM requires higher level of implementation of safety and quality management systems that should be compliant with the deep space missions. And these standards are more strict and more complex than the satellites that we have been working on before. So moving to the next question, Your Excellency, Omran mentioned that building scientific capabilities is one of the main objectives. So can you share with us how will we achieve them? What have been done so far to help supporting that objective?
Absolutely. So one of the primary objectives Omran spoke about is developing capabilities, and in science, developing new capacity. Going about developing capabilities and capacity is not as easy as getting an education and suddenly you'll know how to design and develop a spacecraft, or getting an education in planetary science or physics and then being capable of working on a mission that explores another planet. What it requires is actually working through the process, working on a project, learning the nuances of how do you use this knowledge that you have and implement it. You learn by doing. And this is one of the foundations of developing the space program here in the UAE, especially that there's no other place that you can go to gain experience from. So the only way to do it is to take very complex missions such as the Emirates Mars mission and start learning by designing and developing through it. And that has been our continuous methodology for developing our engineering talent. So what the Emirates Mars mission did when it came to engineering talent is it increase the capabilities, the same as Suhail just mentioned. The capability, the complexity of this mission is 5 times more than any other mission that we've all worked on prior to this. So this increases your capabilities in the very short amount of time that this mission takes to design and develop. So rather than developing it step by step as you would grow as an organization, you've sped up and made it more rapid, the development process, through the start of this mission that's taken 6 years to design and develop. The other aspect of it is at the Mohammed Rashid Space Center prior to this mission, we did not have a science department, nor was there a focus on science. The focus was mostly on engineering talent and engineering capabilities. What this allowed us to do is develop new capacity on utilizing science and researchers in design and development of missions. So for the first time, we're capable of having both scientists and engineers working together to design a system and working in conjunction throughout all phases in the mission to get to the point where you have a spacecraft that's meant to head towards Mars and is ready to be launched within the next few weeks. Now, how did we get to a point of being able to develop these capabilities, especially that these capabilities were not present at the center before? And that was done by creating an apprenticeship program where we worked very closely with a team of experienced scientists, and they're the foremost scientists in the area of planetary atmosphere, and more specifically in Mars atmospheres. And they had the second layer of experience, including working on design and development of missions, because we want our researchers and our team to go through the entire process of development. And what we did is paired the team, who's currently 12 people who are working in the science team of the Emirates Mars mission, together with world-renowned scientists in the field over the course of the last 5 years. And what they've done is taken data sets that are analogous, so similar to the data sets that we will capture from Mars from other instruments, and also from other models, and utilize those to do the type of research that they would do once we get to Mars and get the data from the Emirates Mars mission. The other aspect is the spacecraft and the instruments on the spacecraft capture digital images. Those digital images are then transferred here. You can't use them as they are to do your science analysis and your science research. You actually have to process them and ingest them and take them to a level where scientists can then can extract them and analyze them and start finding the evidence that is required to meet our science objectives. That is what we call the data pipeline. So the team has also been working on developing the data pipeline, which is the translator from digital data to scientific data. We have also been working on how do we manipulate. We take this data, and you can't just take bits and pieces of data across different days and then plot them and then find the scientific understanding that you want. There's a lot of tools and models that you require to be built that are capable of linking all these different data sets. Like I said, we have 3 different instruments studying multiple elements that are on Mars, and we need to take all these elements and start putting them together so that we can have a better understanding of the model that is the atmosphere of Mars. And doing that is a process that we call the science closure. So how do we address the outcomes of the objectives that we set at the beginning of this mission, and how do we ensure that we're doing all the analysis that is required? That is also what the team has been doing, and it's sort of like a preparation. So we better understand how the instruments have now been designed and developed, how the instruments are going to function. We have test data from the instruments and validated that using these test data, we're able to meet the requirements of this mission. And then we put together all the different models and tools that the team is going to work on down the line once we start receiving data from this mission. Something that was also important for us, and I go back to the national objective that we had. The science has to be novel, and the science has to be relevant to scientists around the world, and it has to be beneficial to them. What that translates into is that we don't have an initial embargo period on the data. So once we capture the science data of this mission, we will share it with the rest of the world. So we have an initial period where we check that the data pipeline is functioning, that the data that's being produced, the scientific data, is valid to be utilized by scientists, and we release that data set to the public free of charge without an initial embargo period. So when the science team is working on the data that is verified, scientists around the world can also extract that data and start using it in their scientific research to further the advancement. We enter into our science orbit in end of April, beginning of May in 2021. We then release our first set of data at the latest by September 2021.
Thank you, Your Excellency. In April, during the pandemic, we have seen in the news the team successfully transported spacecraft from UAE to Japan. So in terms of safety, mission assurance, and logistics, I can say that we transported the spacecraft with meeting the safety and quality standards required for that sensitive transportation. But the question to you, Omran, how did all this happen? What sacrifices you had to make, and what challenges you faced? Knowing that all the international flights were cancelled by that time because of the lockdown.
So Mars by itself is difficult and is challenging, and the mission itself had a lot of challenges given the requirements that were set, the time frame, the budget, the expectation. So many things related to the mission was quite challenging. However, COVID-19 came and took it to the next level also for us. It was supposed to be one of the quiet phases within the mission, in which we are basically completing the testing that's supposed to be taking place in UAE. And we were going to ship the spacecraft to Japan in May of this year for about 50-day kind of preparation for the launch in the launch campaign. However, due to COVID-19, we had to actually reassess and evaluate our plans. We had to come up with different scenarios, and we had to actually operate since day one, before even the restrictions started to come into place, under the worst case scenario. And actually, eventually, I mean, the situation did reach the worst case scenario. However, we were able to avoid a lot of the complications, because we were able to mobilize the team earlier than scheduled, and sort of react before these things, these restrictions, a lot of these restrictions were imposed. I mean, so basically we had to send the spacecraft earlier than planned. We had to coordinate with the Japanese government and the UAE government in getting exemptions for the team to fly. We had to basically break the team into 3 different teams. It was supposed to be originally the same team that's going to handle the spacecraft here in Dubai, goes with the spacecraft to Japan, and then travel back and forth between Japan and UAE until the launch day. However, that had to change. So we had to split them into 3. A team that had to be sent earlier, 2 weeks before we shipped the spacecraft. We had to send them to Japan, and they had to go there and go into self-quarantine, which was actually self-imposed by us as a team. At that point, Japan was not didn't have that requirement. We had to have a team that was based in the UAE as a backup for that team that's in Japan if something happens, and then a team that will be accompanying the spacecraft when we send it. So once they land in Japan, they hand over the spacecraft to the team that just left the quarantine, and then that team enters quarantine. So it literally had a big impact on our plans, and we had to change it and adapt to it. But the good thing is that we were able to identify the risks at the early point, and sort of prepare and react accordingly. So we operated under worst case scenario before the situation reached worst case scenario. And one thing that really helped us also, basically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the UAE, played a vital role in enabling this to happen. We reached a point in which basically the work of 6 years and the effort that the team put into this and the goals that the government set was at risk of reaching Mars before the 2nd of December 2021. So if we miss the launch opportunity this year, we'll have to wait for 2 years, because the opportunity to launch to Mars comes once every 2 years. And the next opportunity is in 2022, which is after the 2nd of December 2021. So a very important national goal wouldn't have been achieved. But because of the good relationship that the UAE had, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that the UAE built those relationships over many years with different countries, with Japan, we were able to work around those challenges. Even though the restrictions were not still fully imposed, but they were restrictions, and they were coming into place. And when the spacecraft actually arrived in Japan, there was almost a full-on lockdown in the UAE, and also in Japan, they were already in their emergency status with regards to COVID-19. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs played a big role in this. The UAE embassy in Japan was extremely helpful and supporting and making things happen, and actually negotiating on our behalf with the Japanese government and facilitating many things, and also at the same time providing the assurances that the team needed to have in case something happens and God forbid someone gets infected. How will we be handling it? So all these plans were sorted out with the embassy over there, and they were actually on top of it and very supportive. Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also played a big role in helping this thing happen. But again, that happened all through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the UAE. So the relationships that the UAE has invested with different nations, whether it's with the US or Japan or any other nation, played a vital role in making this mission a success. The reason why we're able to reach the point where we are today with the mission, with such limited resources and such a tight time frame and schedule, is because of international collaboration, because we worked with different countries, and because the UAE has a very strong and relationship with these nations that we're currently working. That the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has invested in building those relationships over the past 48 years. Is the reason why we're actually able to get the knowledge to the UAE, and also to be able to get and navigate through the different set of challenges that came out through the mission from day one, whether it's about export control, or about having a team that's based in the US working with us, or about exporting technology to the UAE, or about sending UAE-made technology to the US and then bringing it back, to actually sending a spacecraft like in the middle of a global pandemic with full-on travel restrictions around the world, and have it safely arrive in Japan.
Thank you, Ammar. It's really interesting to know and to see that different entities collaborate together to make the transportation for the spacecraft very smooth and on schedule. Suhail, I would like to ask you, since you were part of the team who were responsible to receive the spacecraft in Japan, how was your experience, and have you faced any challenges?
So we stayed in, as Omran said, we stayed in Tokyo for 2 weeks in self-quarantine. And then we traveled to Nagoya, where we are accepting the spacecraft arrival. And once the spacecraft was arrived through air, we unpacked it from the airplane, and we waited to onboard it on a ship to be ported from Nagoya to Tanegashima. And that trip took 44 hours on the sea. And we accompanied the spacecraft. 2 people were with the spacecraft. As we reached Tanegashima, Tanegashima Island, the Tanegashima Space Center is located there. We unpacked the spacecraft and we left it in the port until almost midnight, so we can block all the roads as was escorted with the police from the port to with 2 hours drive until we inserted in the spacecraft checkout room in the space center here in Tanegashima. And then we started the testing, unpacking our crates, putting the spacecraft inside the clean room, double checking everything is fine, and then we start doing our initial testing. And to add on the spice of COVID-19, we also reacted with 2 earthquakes here in Tanegashima, and we have to inspect everything is fine with the spacecraft and this facility here as well.
Just to add to the part of challenges, we had to transport the spacecraft in a portable clean room. That was one of the things that the team had to work on and make sure that it doesn't impose any additional risks during transportation. So, Omran, we are 26 days away from launch. So, what happens after that? Does the launch mean the end of AMM mission?
So the launch actually it symbolizes the start of a new phase in the mission. It doesn't end there. It's a very critical milestone for the mission, in which the work the past 6 years, would be the first time we actually tested and used it in space. Any single mistake with the launch event, we lose the work for the past 6 years. So it's very critical event. However, it's not the only critical event. So once we launch, we separate from the launcher about 50 minutes after launch, between 50 minutes to 60 minutes after launch, in which the spacecraft starts detumbling and then deploying its solar panels. And right after that, we basically turn on our propulsion system and use it to navigate towards Mars. The propulsion system that we had a significant Emirati contribution in building it, and it's one of the important kind of areas that the UAE would require for future deep space missions. So we'll go over a 7-month journey until we reach Mars. By the time we reach Mars, we would have crossed more than 495 million kilometers. We'll be traveling at average speed of 121,000 kilometers per hour. at very high speed. And as Suhail mentioned, 34 minutes before reaching Mars, we'll have to slow down the spacecraft. And we'll have to go into like a brake mode. So we'll have to flip the spacecraft and turn on our propulsion system to full power, in which we're going to consume a lot of our propulsion. So a lot of that 800 kilograms will be consumed because of that process. So for 34 minutes nonstop, we'll be firing the propulsion to slow the spacecraft down from 21,000 kilometers per hour to about 18,000 kilometers per hour. Okay. We go too slow, we crash on Mars. We go too fast, we pass Mars. And all that has to happen autonomously. Why? Because Mars is so far away that there is no real-time communication with the spacecraft. There's always going to be at least 15 to 20 minutes delay in communicating with the spacecraft. So we'll find out after the event of reaching Mars whether we've succeeded or not. And the system itself has to be so smart to be able to handle this on its own, and also if a fault happens, to be able to detect it and resolve that anomaly on its own and continue its operation. And of course, all this was designed previously and has been tested. And this is why we say this mission is 5 times more complex than what we've worked on before within the center. So once we reach Mars, we're going to enter the capture orbit, in which we're going to check the status of the spacecraft, make sure everything's working. It's going to be an elliptical orbit. And then about a month or two after that, we'll be shifting into our science orbit, which is also an elliptical orbit, but we'll be collecting the data using our 3 instruments and providing us with a global perspective, a holistic perspective of the Martian atmosphere. And hopefully before the 2nd of December, or by the 2nd of December 2021, inshallah, we'll announce new findings about Mars and the UAE contributes to humanity by bringing this knowledge, and at the same time achieving the vision that His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed Faraj has put for this mission.
Suhail, we spoke about the mission and what happens after launch. However, we forgot to ask you, where is the spacecraft now?
So the spacecraft now we call it the SFA, the Spacecraft Fueling Assembly Room. It's been transferred from the clean room to a more clean room that capable of fueling the spacecraft. The SFA and the Space Center here is a more hazardous area where there is flammable fuel we're operating, so we have to use we call the escape suit that look like an astronaut walking around and jumping around. But this is just to make the engineers in a safe position if they face any leakage. And from here we will start after we finish the fueling. Next week we'll be starting encapsulating that spacecraft into the fairing of the rocket, and that's when we start joint operation with the Japanese Mitsubishi Heavy Industry partners, and then we start together working on encapsulating the spacecraft, making sure everything, and we start closing out the last part and pieces of the we call it the MLI. That we have to remove all that stuff and make it ready for the launch in 3 weeks. So there is a lot of work happening in next week.
What is the MLI? Can you explain?
So the spacecraft is covered with this golden sheet. This golden sheet are 11 sheets of aluminium, and they reflect heat from the spacecraft and keep heat inside the spacecraft. You can say it's an envelope of keeping the spacecraft inside a balanced thermal balanced temperatures.
Thank you, Suhail. Knowing that we have less than a month to make history, this question is to all of you. What is the most thing you're excited about? We can start with Omran.
That's a difficult question, Khuloud. What I'm excited about is actually that the UAE was able to reach this point because of the commitment of the team, but also because of the direct involvement of the leadership within the UAE and their support for the team here. The public in the UAE have been very excited and supportive of the mission and the space program overall. And it's really exciting to see this kind of activities taking place in the UAE. 10 years ago, no one would have imagined that we would go to Mars. Today, we're almost there, halfway there. So excited about a lot of things. At the same time, nervous about different things also. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
I think this is the hardest question that you've asked us today. The most I'm looking forward to is seeing an Emirati declare a new scientific finding about Mars. And this is something that I'm looking forward to from our science team.
Thank you, and Suhail.
Hard question. I'm excited. I have two excitement. One is joy, the first signal that we are receiving from the spacecraft, and the other one, which is the most fear part of the mission, is the Mars orbit insertion, and that's gonna be our excitement happening there.
Since I'm the moderator, I have the advantage of knowing the questions. So it's an easy question to me, but my answer is I'm excited to see the UAE shine like a star in the space field, sending the message of our leaders and giving hope to the world that nothing is impossible. We have come to the end of the session. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, our speakers, and special thanks to the Ministry of Affairs and International Cooperation for hosting us today. I hope you all enjoyed like we did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.